Hey friends, welcome in. So today I'll be going over sort of an old case, and for a few reasons. This is the InWin 303C. Thanks to the guys over at InWin for sending me a unit. They also sent me 6 Aurora RGB case fans to work with as well. And here are the reasons why I've decided to choose this case. Number one is I'm working on a new project and I chose this case, so I decided to reach out to them and see if they can send me a unit because I heard a lot of good things about it, so I want to try it. And sure enough, they did. And I also had a couple of ideas to make some videos regarding this case. And number two is that my channel primarily has been about peripherals like keyboards, mice, headsets mainly, and I want to diversify my portfolio. And three is I want to build my connections with manufacturers that I have not yet worked with. So I'm really excited and grateful for this collaboration with InWin. Okay, and in this video, I will be talking about the specs, my build experience, thermals and noise test, and see what it's like, so share that experience with you guys. With that being said, let's begin. The 303C mid tower is currently priced at $100 and comes in either black or white. My first impression when I unboxed it, it's pretty heavy for a mid tower weighing in at 24 pounds or roughly 11 kilograms. And that is no complaint on my end because this thing is a full steel chassis, strong and sturdy as hell, with dimensions of 19 by 8.5 by 19.9 inches of length, width, and height respectively. It's got a 3mm thick tinted tempered glass on the left panel that can be easily opened and closed by a push of a spring button mechanism up top. The glass is held in place like a hinge at the bottom with these plastic inserts that just slide in and sit. Very convenient without the use of thumb screws as seen commonly in other tempered glass designs. The top and front panels are closed off from ventilation as they leave all the airflow to the right and bottom panels as well as the back side of the case. The I/O ports are RGB lit and located on the front side, which includes the power and reset buttons, the InWin logo, 2 USB 3.0s, 2 3.5mm jacks for audio, and the USB-C 3.1 Gen 2 port, hence the 303C in its name. Moving on to the right side of the case, where the panel is held in place with 2 thumb screws up top that don't have to be removed completely in order to access inside the case. The right panel also sits at the bottom with 2 inserts like the aforementioned tempered glass. It's also got the honeycomb cutouts for airflow ventilation, which is pretty cool. Pun intended. Once opened, taking a look at the right side of the case, we do see that the upper chamber is reserved for the power supply, which will support up to 200mm. Naturally, this makes the motherboard mounting sit a bit lower in the case here, which will support up to a standard ATX board. Now, right next to it, we do see there are 2 trays pre-installed with thumb screws meant to hold 3.5-inch drives. I believe you can also use these to store 2.5-inch SSDs as well. If you don't want to use these trays because you don't plan on running any 3.5 or 2.5-inch drives like me, then you can certainly remove them if you want. Moving on to the other inside. The PSU compartment up top here is also meant for exhaust fans that will support up to a 360mm rad. And yes, if you do end up using all 3 spots, the first fan back here will exhaust into the PSU, which is actually okay because that means it will help assist the power supply fan to pull air into it and out the back. I want to mention this because some people were saying that in this case, the PSU would hinder the exhausted airflow, but that's not actually what's happening. You get double fans pulling air from this back spot and out the right side panel, which is ultimately a good thing. The clearance for this portion is about 70mm before you touch tempered glass. I would not advise maxing this clearance out with a really thick radiator because you do want some room for the fans to breathe and pull air through. Unless you don't plan on using the tempered glass and doing an open case build, then by all means. Over here, you get 2 pre-installed 2.5-inch bays for SSDs that are held in by thumb screws as well. Feel free to remove those if you don't plan on using anything there. And this case does have these cutout slots where you can potentially mount a reservoir and pump if you're doing custom liquid cooling. In fact, this case was built with custom liquid cooling in mind. Down here at the bottom is where the intake is. You can fit up to triple 120mm fans and or a 360mm radiator, and there is a dust filter that can be pulled out like so. Now, I have read and seen some people saying that trying to fit a radiator plus fans might be too much because it can clash with the bottom side of your motherboard, or it's just a really tight fit to work with. But as my first time working on this case, we shall soon find out. Oh, and these are the front I/O ports cables, obviously. The back side of the case also has room for a 120mm fan and or radiator. Up here is of course your power supply access, motherboard I/O cutout, and PCIe slots. One of the things I love about this case is that the honeycomb cutouts are huge. That's a lot of airflow that can easily pass through. Now, real quick, I want to backtrack down to the bottom side again and talk about the case feet. You can remove the feet by first removing these rubber pads that help protect and prevent the case feet from scratching your table or whatever surface you place your PC on. By doing so, you can now access the hidden screws that hold it there. Undo these screws and now you have full access to the bottom of the case. So why would you want to do this? Well, when you're installing fans or radiators at the bottom, if your feet are in place, like attached to the fan, your screwdriver will not be able to get to the fans, the mounting holes, while they're in place. So remember this step when you're building in the 303C or the regular 303. Now, as for the system that I have in here to run tests and numbers for temperatures and noise, it is my personal PC running an 8700K overclocked to 4.8 GHz on an MSI Z370 Gaming M5 motherboard. The CPU cooler is the Hyper 212 Black Edition by Cooler Master. The case fans are 6 120mm Aurora RGB fans provided by InWin as well. There's 32 GB of DDR4 Dominator Platinums by Corsair, which have a cast latency of 16 or CL16. MSI 1080 Ti Gaming X GPU running at stock with the Samsung 960 Pro NVMe as my main drive. I also have a 2TB Samsung 970 EVO NVMe as my storage. I don't use any mechanical hard drives or 2.5-inch SSD drives. I try to consolidate my system down with as little parts and cables needed as I can. Keep in mind that this is just one example, my own personal build used for my testing and my daily use, so numbers may vary for your own setup and workloads. As for temperatures, I'm going to focus more on the CPU and GPU side of things, as that's what most people keep an eye on for common work activities. I was using HW monitor to read my numbers as well as the digital meter that's built into my MSI motherboard. When my PC is idling, it comfortably sits an average of 38 degrees C for the CPU and GPU. But when I jump on a heavy workload like 4K video editing on Adobe Premiere, my CPU spikes to around 85 degrees C during video exporting, but will float around 65 degrees to 70 degrees throughout most of that process. Playing graphically intensive games like Outer Worlds will be more GPU based, and my 1080 Ti will average about 65 to 70 degrees C on ultra settings. But these numbers can also vary a bit depending on what fan curves you have set. When under workloads, depending on what kind of work, I just use the 1400 RPM on the PWM settings for the Aurora case fans when gaming, but turn on turbo when I'm exporting a 4K video when I'm editing, as that process actually heats up my CPU quite a bit past 80 degrees C. Alright, even though this is a PC case review, since InWin did send me 6 Aurora RGB case fans, I'm just going to make a quick note and briefly talk about them just in case you're interested. The Aurora RGB fans has two main positives in my book. First, it's the ability to daisy chain, which is a huge saver on cable management. I wish more manufacturers would pay more attention to this particular design. The other major plus is that the software is extremely easy to use. The software for InWin's Aurora RGB fans isn't very complex at all. It's just one little interface that barely takes up your computer screen. On the bottom, there's a power switch that basically just toggles your fan LEDs on and off. On the right side of the interface, which is designated by blue icons, this side allows you to change the speed and brightness of your lighting effects. Then you have the red icons on the left, which lets you change the PWM fan speeds from a range of 800 to 1400 RPM, as well as a turbo mode that ramps the fans up to 2000 RPM. Now, the downside of the Aurora fans is that they feel and look really cheap. The frame is a very thin, fragile piece of plastic with anti-vibration rubber pads. They also feel very light. I kid you not, when I was screwing the fans into the case, there were several times when I heard a loud crack, which kept stopping me a bit because I thought I had cracked the fans or damaged the PCB within the fans that facilitate all the RGB functions and the PWM functions. Now, fortunately, that was not the case, and my fans worked fine and made it through this video. Alright, so here are my final thoughts on the InWin 3C mid-tower case. I can see why this thing got a lot of praise and positive feedback because it's really fun to build in. There's a lot of room. It's super easy to build in as well. And this design was, they designed it with custom liquid cooling in mind, so enthusiasts should be really happy with it. I think it looks great. It's very sturdy, full steel, really strong case, easy to build in. Overall, a really awesome experience. So if you guys have played with or built in this case before, let me know down in the comments below. And any advice and tips that you would give on custom liquid cooling, I would love to hear that because, well, here's a hint. The project I'm working on is actually going to be my first custom liquid cooling case. And I do plan on putting out videos on the progress updates and the builds coming in the future. So subscribe to my channel for content like this, or if you want to see what that build looks like in the end. Yeah, so it really helps. And thumbs up for the video if you enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think. And as always, I appreciate your time in watching my content. So yeah, until next time, peace.